Before the Fellowship is the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Greg.
I am Greg.
We're all Greg. Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time we concluded chapter 20. The Eldar came to mistrust men outside the three houses of the Edain. The sons of Fëanor were broken and now dwelt in the foothills of Ered Lindon. The Easterling men were sent to Hithlum, where they pillaged the remaining people of Hador, who were eventually forced into labor in the north. Morgoth sent forces to Brythomba and Elgarest near the sea and slayed the greater part of Círdan's people. Círdan and Gil-galad fled into the mouths of Sirion, and Turgon asked Círdan to make 7 ships to send into the west. Only one of these messengers returned. Morgoth was angered for allowing Turgon to escape. Morgoth tried in vain to convince Húrin to betray Turgon. Morgoth bound him to the peak of Thangorodrim so that he would see the destruction to come. A great heap of the slain was formed on Foglith, Haden Nendengin, the hill of the slain. Today we begin chapter 21, which is found on page 198 of the second edition. Of Túrin Turambar. Rhiann, daughter of Belegund, was the wife of Huor, son of Galdor, and she was wedded to him 2 months before he went to Húrin, his brother, to the Nirnaeth Arnoediad. When no tidings came of her lord, she fled into the wild, but she was aided by the grey elves of Mithrim, and when her son Tuor was born, they fostered him. Then Rhiann departed from Hithlum, and going to the Hod en Nendengin, she laid herself down upon it and died. Morwen, daughter of Baragund, was the wife of Húrin, lord of Dor Lomin, and their son was Túrin, who was born in the year that Beren Erchamion came upon Luthien in the forest of Neldoreth. A daughter they had also was called Lalaeth, which is laughter, and she was beloved by Túrin, her brother. But when she was 3 years old, there came a pestilence to Hithlum, born on an evil wind out of Angband, and she died. Now after the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, Morwen abode still in Dor Lomin, for Túrin was but 8 years old, and she was again with child. Those days were evil, for the Easterlings that came into Hithlum despised the remnant of the people of Hador, and they oppressed them, and took their lands and their goods, and enslaved their children. But so great was the beauty and majesty of the lady of Dor Lomin that the Easterlings were afraid, and dared not to lay hands upon her or her household, and they whispered among themselves, saying that she was perilous, and a witch skilled in magic and in league with the elves. Yet she was now poor and without aid, save that she was succored secretly by a kinswoman of Húrin named Erin, whom Broda, an Easterling, had taken for his wife. And Morwen feared greatly that Túrin would be taken from her and enslaved. Therefore it came into her heart to send him away in secret, and to beg King Thingol to harbour him, for Beren, son of Barahir, was her father's kinman, and he had been moreover a friend of Húrin ere evil befell. Therefore, in the autumn of the year of lamentation, Morwen sent Túrin forth over the mountains with 2 aged servants, bidding them find entry, if they could, into the kingdom of Doriath. Thus was the fate of Túrin woven, which is full told in that lay that is called Nar-i Hin Húrin, the tale of the children of Húrin, and is the longest of all the lays that speak of those days. Here that tale is told in brief, for it is woven with the fate of the Silmarils and of the elves, and it is called the Tale of Grief, for it is sorrowful, and in it are revealed most evil works of Morgoth Bolglir. In the first beginning of the year, Morwen gave birth to her child, the daughter of Húrin, and named her Ninor, which is mourning. But Túrin and his companions, passing through great perils, came at last to the borders of Doriath, and there they were found by Beleg Strongbow, chief of the march wardens of King Thingol, who led them to Menegroth. Then Thingol received Túrin and took him even to his own fostering, in honor of Húrin the Steadfast. But Thingol's mood was changed towards the houses of elf friends. Thereafter messengers went forth from Hithlum, bidding Morwen to leave Dor-lómin and return with them to Doriath. But still she would not leave the house in which she had dwelt with Húrin. And when the elves departed, she sent with them the dragon helm of Dor-lómin, the greatest of the heirlooms of the house of Hador. Túrin grew fair and strong in Doriath, but he was marked with sorrow. For 9 years he dwelt in Thingol's halls, and during that time his grief grew less. For messengers went at times to Hithlum, and returning they brought better tidings of Morwen and Ninor. But there came a day when the messengers did not return out of the north, and Thingol would send no more. Then Túrin was filled with fear for his mother and his sister, and in grimness of heart he went before the king and asked for mail and sword, and he put on the dragon helm of Dor-lómin and went out to battle on the marches of Doriath, and became the companion in arms of Beleg Cuthalion. And when 3 years had passed, Túrin returned again to Menegroth, but he came from the wild and was unkempt, and his gear and garments were way-worn. Now one there was in Doriath of the people of Nandor, high in the councils of the king. Seiros was his name, and he had long begrudged Túrin the honor he received as Thingol's foster son. And seated opposite to him at the board, he taunted him, saying, "If the men of Hithlum are so wild and fell, of that sort are the women of that land. What sort are they? Do they run like deer clad only in their hair?" Then Túrin, in great anger, took upon drinking vessel and cast it at Seiros, and he was grievously hurt. On the next day, Seiros waylaid Túrin as he sent out from Menegroth to return to the marches. But Túrin overcame him and set him to run naked as a hunted beast through the woods. Then Seiros, fleeing in terror before him, fell into a chasm of a stream, and his body was broken on a great rock in the water. But others coming saw what was done, and Mablung was among them, and he bade Túrin return with him to Menegroth and abide the judgment of the king, seeking his pardon. But Túrin, deeming himself now an outlaw and fearing to be held captive, refused Mablung's bidding and turned swiftly away, and passing through the girdle of Melian, he came into the woods of West Sirion. There he joined himself to a band of such houseless and desperate men as could be found in those evil days lurking in the wild, and their hands were turned against all who came in their path, elves and men and orcs. But when all had befallen what was told, and searched out before the Thingol, the king pardoned Túrin holding him wrong. In that time, Beleg Strongbow returned from the north marches and came to Menegroth, seeking him. And Thingol spoke to Beleg, saying, I grieve, Cuthalion, for I took Hurin's son as my son, and so he shall remain, unless Hurin himself should return out of the shadows to claim his own. I would not have any say that Túrin was driven forth unjustly into the wild, and gladly would I welcome him back, for I loved him well. And Beleg answered, I will seek Túrin until I find him, and I will bring back to Menegroth if I can, for I love him also. Then Beleg departed from Menegroth, and far across Beleriand he sought in vain for tidings of Túrin through many perils. But Túrin abode long among the outlaws, and became their captain, and he named himself Nithan the Wronged. Very warily they dwelt in the wooded lands south of Teiglin. But when a year had passed since Túrin fled from Doriath, Beleg came upon their lair by night. It chanced that at that time Túrin was gone from the camp, and the outlaws seized Beleg and bound him and treated him cruelly, for they feared him as a spy of the king of Doriath. But Túrin, returning and seeing what was done, was stricken with remorse for all their evil and lawless deeds, and he released Beleg, and they renewed their friendship. And Túrin forswore thenceforward war or plunder against all save the servants of Angband. Then Beleg told Túrin of King Thingol's pardon, and he sought to persuade him by all means that he might return with him to Doriath, saying that there was great need of his strength and of valor on the north marches of the realm. Of late, the orcs have found a way down out of Tar Nur Fuin, he said. They have made a road through the pass of Anach. I do not remember it, said Túrin. Never did we go so far from the borders, said Beleg. But you have seen the peaks of Crisegrim far off, and to the east the dark walls of Gorgoroth. Anach lies between, above the high springs of Mindeb, a hard and dangerous road, yet many come by it now, and Dimbar, which used to be in peace, is falling under the Black Hand. And the men of Brethil are troubled. We are needed there. But in the pride of his heart, Túrin refused the pardon of the king, and the words of Beleg were of no avail to change his mood. And for his part, urged Beleg to remain with him in the lands of West Syrian, but that Beleg would not do, and said, Hard are you, Túrin, and stubborn. Now the time is mine. If you wish indeed to have the strongbow beside you, look for me in Dimbar, for thither I shall return. On the next day, Beleg set out, and Túrin went with him a bowshot from the camp, but he said nothing. Is it farewell then, son of Túrin? Said Beleg. Then Túrin looked out westward, and he saw far off the great height of Amon-Ruh, the unwitting of what lay before him, and answered, You have said, seek me in Dimbar. But I say, seek for me on Amon-Ruh. Else, this is our last farewell. Then they parted in friendship, yet in sadness. So in summary, Tuor is born to Rian and Galdor. Túrin is the son of Hurin and Morwen. After the Easterlings come to Hithlum, Morwen sends Túrin to Doriath to seek refuge. He grows up and maintained contact with his mother and sister. When messengers no longer come to Menegroth, he arms himself and departs for Hithlum with Beleg Strongbow. After 3 years in the wilderness, he returns, and Mablung witnesses his involvement in the death of Nandor. Túrin flees and turns to a life of lawlessness. But Thingol pardons him and eagerly awaits his return. Beleg searches for him and is captured and mistreated by Túrin's band of outlaws. Túrin repents of his evil deeds. Beleg tries in vain to persuade him to return to Menegroth, but pride leads Túrin to refuse the pardon of the king. Now, quick little clarification. Nandor, specifically, what's that guy's name? I'm trying to look it up. The one who fell into the stream.
Saros.
Yes.
I thought it was super interesting how all the characters in the story are heavy chain smokers.
Yes.
With like just these like gravelly voices.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have to be, right?
Battle-worn men.
Yeah. I mean,
well,
if I was like,
are going to have the little...
Hi there. If I did that kind of voice, I don't think it would have the same kind of...
Pretty soon, they're going to have...
You're right.
They're going to have those, where they have to like stimulate the vocal folds with some device to talk.
Oh, the smoking device thing?
Yeah, those ones.
Exactly.
If the men of Hithlum are so wild.
That's not a disability, is it? We weren't just making fun of people who like those people did it to themselves, right?
Well, addiction.
Not always.
Not always. Okay, sorry. We're not trying to make fun of people with problems. Greg, I just sometimes find you to be insensitive. We should probably air this out right now, live for everybody to witness.
Sometimes my trying to be funny gets, it leads me to places that I don't want to go.
Dark
Greg,
places.
this isn't actually a podcast, so Dan and I have been waiting for this moment.
Yeah. We said that we're going to read the whole book with you just to get to this point.
We're on episode 52. We're about 200 pages in, and we just used it to get your ear.
There is
so
no
we
Discord.
Hope you're listening to us.
Yeah.
There's no Discord. Yeah.
So Greg, why do you make fun of people? And tell us what's interesting in these few chapters, or this chapter.
He's done. He's like,
no, it's I gotta sit with that, I gotta sit with that now. I gotta live with that truth about myself.
Yeah, you have to live with that.
Yeah.
Hey, we are exactly 2/3 of the way through the book.
Oh wow.
Well, that's like in the indexes and everything too. The indices.
No, I did my math, Greg.
What page number did you go to?
Because 304 is the end of the book.
Oh yeah.
The end of the Silmarillion though is 255.
Ooh.
Oh,
I don't know why I'm doing. Why am I doing this? I'm sorry.
You're right, Greg. You know what? Here, Dan and I will mute ourselves.
Yeah.
All right, Greg. Let us know what you think of the book. Okay, I'll just listen.
Yeah, we'll tune in next week.
Okay. All right. So Túrin is the tale of grief. It's a sad story, and there's no other way to put it. It's the tale of grief. Well,
you could put it the Shroud of Túrin.
Oh, I guess you could.
That's another way to put it. I mean, you said there was no other way, so I was just giving one example.
I have something to say.
Okay.
But Greg, if what I say is wrong, just don't correct me, because I'm at my breaking point. All right, so I noticed that Túrin was born in the same year that Beren came upon Luthien in the forest. That's kind of interesting. There's like
super interesting
a connection between them two as characters. It mentions Beren and Luthien a couple times in this reading.
Yep.
Hey, you know when Túrin decides not to go back, so he fights Saros and like humiliates him because Saros just won't leave him alone and attacks him, and then like Saros is running away and then falls to his death. So it's not exactly Beren's fault, it's not exactly Turin's fault. But Túrin is requested to come back to the king, and he doesn't. Now, do you think that was is that a cowardly thing?
I think it's a fair
Beren
thing.
would have returned if we're comparing the two.
I don't think it's cowardly. I think it's more pride and fear, but not cowardice fear. Maybe. I don't know.
I think
I'm looking up cowardice in the index.
It is interesting comparing him to Beren, because Cameron, I know you had mentioned a number of times Beren does what needs to be done, no matter what is gonna, no matter what,
even if it's like kind of stupid,
right? But if it's right, that's not the case with Túrin. I think this is why it makes this kind of cowardly, Dan. This guy Mablung sees what happens and he calls him out on it, and he tells him, you need to do what's right and go before Thingol and face his judgment. And so he kind of had that like direct like prick of his conscience from Mablung, and he still ran off. And then
it leads immediately to a life of crime, basically.
Yeah, he just falls into a life of crime. And this is why I think it's important.
It's arrogance and pride driven.
Yeah, maybe cowardice is not the right word.
Yeah, I mean, obviously cowardice is probably underneath it, but he's seems motivated by pride and arrogance.
Well, what's interesting,
fearing to be held captive.
Yeah. Well, what I think is interesting about that is that ultimately Thingol forgave him. And if he would have returned
without even asking for forgiveness,
right.
Yeah.
If he would have returned, he would have been okay because he would have received the mercy of Thingol. But I think it is kind of fear that drove him. You know what this reminds me of? Have you seen the movie Donnie Darko?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's like that scene where they're in the classroom and there's a spectrum of fear and love, and they have to. The assignment for the students is like, someone finds a wallet. They decide to return the wallet, but they take the cash before. And then like they have to plot where on that spectrum does that act fall. And then he like freaks out. He's like, it's not that simple. Not everything is fear and love. So it is kind of funny, like simplifying it to that. That's a very funny scene too. If you haven't seen that movie, you should at least watch that scene.
You think that scene's funny?
It's so funny because then he gets in trouble and he's in the principal's office and she's like, you know where he told me where I can insert the cards or something,
Oh yeah. That's a really interesting film. I got to watch that again.
It's a weird one.
Yeah, but he immediately turns to a life as an outlaw because he joins up with men. Because remember, the orcs and the Easterlings are just like all over the place. And in the previous chapter, we read that you couldn't be free to roam in field or wilderness.
Okay. That's a good point, because it's not like he's just hiding in the bushes. Like he's out slaying creatures and stuff.
Well,
right?
but his hands were turned, it says, against all, including elves and men and orcs.
So it's not total. I mean, it can't be total cowardice then, because he's challenging strong creatures.
Sure.
And also, that's referring to the group and not necessarily him, but it is referring to the people he joined.
There is a certain level where he's just avoiding accountability for his own actions. Like maybe he didn't directly kill this guy, but he wasn't. There was conflict, and it ended up with this guy dying. But he's like totally running from accountability for it.
And he doesn't know that his foster father, so to speak, is ready to forgive him.
It's
he
funny
thinks he'll be a captive.
I do think Thingol has softened a little bit. At first, you know what this? Okay, here's a good parallel. Fiddler on the Roof, Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. You know, at the beginning, he's like, my daughter can't marry who she wants, and then he kind of gives into that, and then he's like, my daughter can't marry a Russian man, and then he gives into that too, and then like he kind of like just starts to bend. And Thingol at first he like hates Baron. He's like, you can't have my daughter, and now he's like adopted this guy Túrin. Like he at first he was so isolationist and just like angry at everybody, it seemed like, but he's really softened a little bit.
That's true. That's a good point.
He's very compassionate in this story. Because remember when he saw Baron for the first time, he's like, I should kill you right here on the spot or something.
Yeah.
Was it because I'm trying to remember Baron like found his way into his kingdom? Or is it because he was making advances on Luthien?
It was a Luthien thing, wasn't it?
Oh, we just read this and we already forgot.
No, it was like
a month ago.
Yeah, it was days ago. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It does mention a lot of times, Dan, I will say, the pride in Turin's heart. That seems to be a really
top of 201, but in the pride of his heart, Túrin refused the pardon of the king.
Yeah, he just seems
he's
a little arrogant and prideful.
He's sad too. Didn't one of his siblings die?
Yeah. I mean, it says siblings. Multiple.
And his father has been gone forever, like captured in the war.
I mean, that's really sad at the beginning. I mean, he loses his daughter. He's not his daughter, his sister. Túrin loved her. Her name was Laughter, and she died at 3. Like,
that's very sad.
I have a 3-year-old, and she's just so much fun, and she could be called Laughter. And I couldn't imagine what that would do to my eldest son. He'd probably join a band of men who killed elves and orcs.
Probably,
yeah. That's a good point.
You know what? One of my favorite characters of this so far is Beleg. Beleg Strongbow. He's like a really good, faithful friend here. He's always trying to help him out, even though he's not the best guy.
I love how he's trying to spring him into battle, like help out, like stop with this band of like ruffians and join me. He's like giving him
he risks his life for him.
Yeah, but then he's like, let's go fight the Black Hand. Like you're needed.
Yeah.
You're needed with us.
I think we all need a friend like Beleg who will call us on our BS and be like, when other people are enabling us, he's like, no, this is not good. But he doesn't give up on him. He just keeps because he met him much earlier and went out with him in the wilderness for 3 years. Now he's come to bring him back to Thingol to receive mercy. He's a good one.
Him.
Yeah,
that's kind of sad. But you do see Túrin kind of get angry at his band of dudes for roughing Beleg up. So at least there's maybe something redemptive still in Túrin. Like I felt when we were reading the story of Feanor that it was just like downhill. It was just constantly downhill.
That's true.
This hasn't got that same feel. He's more hot-headed, I think. This guy's more hot-headed without like any real reason, except for his own woundedness from his past of dying siblings and grief in his family.
Yeah, there's something kind of like Prodigal Sonny about his relationship with Thingol, where he just keeps running, and Thingol says, Gladly would I welcome him back, for I loved him well.
Yeah.
He's just waiting for him to come back to him.
But he's also playing the victim. Túrin is. Like, he's leaning into his grief, and he's leaning into... he names himself Nathan, or Nethan, the wronged.
Yeah.
Like, that's like... such a victim mentality right there.
Yeah.
And when you're kind of trapped in that sort of victim, like, you don't accept people's help because you'd rather be the victim. You'd rather be justified.
How old is he? He sounds like a teenager.
He really does, doesn't he?
No offense to all you teenagers out there. This is how Dan and Cameron and I were when we were teenagers.
Yeah, we were teenagers once upon a time.
Yeah. 28 years ago, you were a teenager, Dan. Or 38, is it?
Teenagers.
Years ago? 28 years. I wasn't a teenager 28 years ago. Oh, why did that take so long to figure out in my head?
Dan, I think you'll always look like a 38-year-old for the rest of your life.
Thank you. I just turned 38. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Good.
Well, you've looked 38 for the past 7 years.
Yeah, like, what is that?
When you were 12, I was like, that guy is going to be 38 his entire life. Especially when he does the Beleg Strongbow voice.
I'm going to say I'm rooting for Túrin.
Okay.
I want him to...
All right. I'm rooting for Morgoth.
Realize the error of his ways and come back to Thingol. You know, I'm going to say it. I want it. Or if he doesn't do that, I want him to brutally die.
Ooh.
Like, one of those two things.
Okay, well, don't read the very next sentence.
Okay.
It answers that question.
It doesn't, dude.
That's Beleg. That's Beleg that returned.
Oh.
What are you talking about? Well, we need to do that next week anyway.
Yeah.
So, hey, guys, if you liked what you heard today, please rate us 3 Silmarillions out of 3. Follow us everywhere at Before the Fellowship. Hop on Discord and correct our accents, correct our names, correct the things that we get wrong. But just join us on Discord and send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com and join us next week as we read the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.